Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1870. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street as Eliza Bennett stood trembling before Sheriff Wade Hollister. At 19, with honey blonde hair and eyes the color of a clear mountain lake, she was the town's schoolteacher, respected for her intelligence and gentle manner. "I didn't take anything, Sheriff," Eliza said, her voice barely audible over the whispers of the gathering crowd. "You must believe me." Sheriff Hollister's weathered face remained impassive as he held up a gold pocket watch. "This was found in your quarters, Miss Bennett. Mr. Rutherford's prized possession, reported missing yesterday. I've never seen that watch before," she protested, panic rising in her chest. "Someone must have planted it there." The sheriff's deputy, a wiry man named Silas, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Ain't that convenient, miss? Just appeared there by magic, did it?" From the crowd, Eleanor Rutherford, wife of the town's wealthiest businessman, stepped forward. "I always knew there was something not right about her. Too pretty, too educated for her own good." Eliza scanned the faces of people she'd taught, neighbors she'd greeted every morning. Their eyes now held suspicion, judgment, even satisfaction. Only Mrs. Parker, the baker's wife, looked away in shame. "Please," Eliza pleaded, "I've served this community faithfully. I would never steal." Sheriff Hollister jangled a set of iron shackles. "The evidence says otherwise, Miss Bennett. In Redemption Creek, we make examples of thieves, even pretty ones." "What will you do?" Eliza whispered, fear constricting her throat. "Justice," he replied coldly. "Public justice." As the shackles closed around her wrists, Eliza caught sight of a stranger at the edge of the crowd, a tall man in a dust-covered duster and worn Stetson, observing the scene with narrowed eyes. "Sheriff," the stranger called out, his voice deep and steady, "is this how Redemption Creek treats its citizens? Condemning without a proper trial." "Mind your business, stranger," Hollister warned. "This town handles its affairs its own way." The man stepped forward, revealing a face weathered by sun and hardship, yet handsome in its rugged way. "Name's Caleb Morgan. Just rode in, but where I come from, even the guilty deserve a fair hearing." "She'll get her hearing," Hollister snapped, "after she's learned her lesson." As they led Eliza away, she caught Caleb's gaze. Something passed between them, a silent promise that made her heart flutter despite her circumstances. In the jailhouse, Eliza sank onto the hard cot, her mind racing. "Why would anyone do this to me?" she whispered to the empty cell. "Because you threatened someone," came a voice from the doorway. Caleb Morgan stood there, hat in hand. "How did you get in here?" she asked. Deputy stepped out. "Not the most dedicated lawman I've seen." He approached the bars. "Who might want to see?" "You disgraced Miss Bennett." Eliza hesitated. "Mr. Rutherford offered me improper attention last month. I refused him. His wife has hated me since." Caleb nodded slowly. "Figured it was something like that. This town's got secrets. I can smell them. Why would you help?" "Me? You don't know me." His eyes, dark as coffee, held hers. "I know injustice when I see it. And I've seen enough of it to last several lifetimes. They're going to parade me through town tomorrow," she whispered, tears finally breaking free. "Like a common criminal." "I'll be there," he promised, replacing his hat. "And Miss Bennett, hold your head high. Dignity is something they can't chain." As his footsteps faded, Eliza clutched the rough blanket around her shoulders, wondering who this stranger was and why fate had brought him to Redemption Creek on this, the worst day of her life. Dawn broke with cruel clarity over Redemption Creek. Eliza had barely slept, the hard cotton cold iron of her shackles ensuring discomfort throughout the night. When Sheriff Hollister unlocked her cell, his expression held a satisfaction that turned her stomach. "Time for your public apology, Miss Bennett," he said, roughly guiding her outside. The morning air carried the scent of dust and wood smoke as townspeople gathered along the main street. Children who had once looked up to her with admiration now stared with wide, confused eyes. Parents pulled them closer, as if her alleged crime might be contagious. "Citizens of Redemption Creek," Hollister announced, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "Behold the consequence of theft and deception. Even those we trust most can harbor darkness." Eliza's cheeks burned with humiliation as whispers rippled through the onlookers. The chains between her ankles allowed only small steps, forcing her to shuffle awkwardly. "Start walking," Hollister commanded, giving her a small shove. With each painful step, Eliza felt her dignity slipping away. A few jeers rose from the crowd, mostly from men who'd had too much whiskey for breakfast. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back, remembering Caleb's words about holding her head high. "There she goes, the schoolmarm thief," someone called. "Out. Not so proper now, are you?" another voice taunted. Eleanor Rutherford watched from the boardwalk, a thin smile playing on her lips. Beside her, her husband Thomas looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting away whenever Eliza glanced in his direction. "Stop right there," a commanding voice cut through the murmurs. The crowd parted as Caleb Morgan strode forward, his spurs jingling with each determined step. Without hesitation, he removed his long duster coat and draped it gently around Eliza's shoulders, covering her shackled arms and providing a shield against the town's scrutiny. "What do you think you're doing?" Hollister demanded, hand moving to his holster. Caleb turned to face him, standing protectively beside Eliza, showing basic human decency. "Something in short supply here, it seems. Remove that coat or face." "Arrest yourself," the sheriff threatened. "On what charge?" Caleb's voice remained calm, but his stance suggested he wouldn't back down easily. "Last I checked, kindness wasn't against the law, even in Redemption Creek." The tension in the air thickened as the two men stared each other down. Eliza felt the weight of Caleb's coat warm from his body, smelling of leather and open plains-like armor against the town's judgment. "You're interfering with justice, stranger," Hollister growled. "This isn't justice," Caleb replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's a spectacle. And I'm wondering why the sheriff is so eager to humiliate this young woman without a proper trial." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement. "I have evidence," Hollister began. "Convenient evidence," Caleb interrupted. "Found by you with no witnesses. That wouldn't stand in any proper court." From the crowd, Mrs. Parker finally stepped forward. "He's right, Sheriff. This isn't how we do things. My husband sat on juries before. There's supposed to be a proper hearing." Others began to nod, the mood shifting subtly. Hollister's face darkened with anger. "Fine, we'll have your hearing, Miss Bennett, tomorrow at noon. Until then, you'll remain in custody." As he moved to lead Eliza back to jail, Caleb stepped in his path. "I'll post her bail." "There is no bail," Hollister snapped. "Then I'll speak to the circuit judge about that when he arrives tomorrow morning," Caleb replied evenly. "I sent a telegram yesterday. Thought he might be interested in how justice is administered here." The sheriff's face paled slightly. "You had no right Every citizen has the right to request judicial oversight, Caleb said. Or did you forget that part of the law, Sheriff? After a tense moment, Hollister grudgingly unlocked Eliza's shackles. You're responsible for ensuring she appears tomorrow, Morgan. If she runs, it's your neck. She won't run, Caleb said confidently, his eyes meeting Eliza's. Innocent people rarely do. As the crowd dispersed, Eliza clutched the coat around her shoulders. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't thank me yet, Caleb replied quietly. This isn't over. But at least now you have a fighting chance. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Caleb escorted Eliza to the small boarding house at the edge of town. Mrs. Winters, the elderly proprietor, welcomed them with concerned eyes, but asked no questions, a rarity in Redemption Creek. You can stay in my late daughter's room, she told Eliza, shooting a warning glance at Caleb. And you, sir, can take the room across the hall. I run a respectable establishment. Once settled in the modest room, Eliza finally allowed herself to collapse onto the bed, emotional exhaustion overtaking her. A soft knock at the door roused her minutes later. Miss Bennett? May I speak with you? Caleb's voice came through the wood. She opened the door, still wearing his coat despite the warmth of the day. It felt like protection. We need to prepare for tomorrow, he said, remaining respectfully in the hallway. Tell me everything about the Rutherfords and your interactions with them. Eliza hesitated, then invited him to sit in the small chair by the window while she perched on the edge of the bed. Thomas Rutherford owns the bank and half the businesses in town, she began. 3 months ago, he offered to sponsor my teaching position with additional funds if I would provide him with private company. When his wife visited her sister in Denver, Caleb's jaw tightened. And you refused. Of course I refused. I told him I'd rather teach for free than compromise my principles. She twisted her hands in her lap. His wife returned early from a trip last month and found him drunk in his office. He must have said something because she's looked at me with hatred ever since. And the sheriff? Where does he fit in? Hollister owes his position to Rutherford's influence. The previous sheriff asked too many questions about some land deals. Caleb nodded thoughtfully. Classic small-town corruption. But framing you seems extreme, even for wounded pride. There's more, Eliza admitted. I've been teaching some of the children from the mining camp to read. Mr. Rutherford doesn't approve, says educated workers cause trouble. Now that sounds like a motive, Caleb said. You're threatening his control. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Winters entered with a tray of tea and biscuits, followed by a nervous-looking young man. This is Timothy, Mr. Rutherford's clerk, she explained. He has something to tell you. Timothy removed his spectacles, cleaning them anxiously. Miss Bennett, I saw Mr. Rutherford place that watch in your quarters yesterday. He didn't see me. I was delivering bank documents to the school board and came through the back. Eliza gasped. You're willing to testify to this? I don't know, he stammered. Mr. Rutherford would ruin me. He'll ruin this whole town if no one stands against him, Caleb said firmly. There's something else, Timothy added. The bank ledgers don't match the reported profits. I've been forced to keep 2 sets of books. Mr. Rutherford has been stealing from investors in the new railroad spur. Caleb leaned forward. And Miss Bennett's literacy program might eventually produce people who could spot such discrepancies. Exactly, Timothy whispered. You're not just a threat to his pride, Miss Bennett. You're a threat to his scheme. After Timothy left, Caleb paced the small room. We need more than one witness. Rutherford could easily discredit him. But who else would risk standing against the most powerful man in town? Eliza asked. Caleb paused, looking out the window toward the distant mountains. Tell me about your background, Miss Bennett. How did a young woman like yourself end up teaching in a frontier town? Eliza stiffened. That's not relevant to my defense. Everything is relevant when you're fighting for your life, he countered gently. And make no mistake, that's what we're doing. Rutherford won't stop at humiliation if he truly sees you as a threat. After a long moment, Elisa sighed. I came west after the war. My father was a Union officer who died at Gettysburg. My mother passed from grief shortly after. I had education but no connections, so I took the teaching position here. And before the war, where was home? Virginia, she admitted quietly. My family owned land there. Caleb's expression remained neutral. Confederate territory. Yes, but my father believed in the Union cause, which made us outcasts. She met his gaze directly. Is my background a problem, Mr. Morgan? Not for me, he said. But it might. Explain Rutherford's eagerness to discredit you. He was a Confederate sympathizer who made a fortune selling supplies to both sides. Eliza's eyes widened. How could you possibly know that? Caleb's hand unconsciously moved to his left side, where Elisa noticed for the first time a slight stiffness in his movement. Because I was there, he said simply. Antietam. I saw his wagons with their false bottoms, Union supplies on top, Confederate below. You were a soldier? Union cavalry. After I recovered from my wounds, I worked for the Pinkerton Agency, investigating war profiteers. His eyes held hers. Including Thomas Rutherford, who vanished before he could be arrested. Understanding dawned on Eliza's face. You didn't. Just happened to be passing through Redemption Creek. No, Miss Bennett, I did not. Caleb's expression was grim. But I never expected to find him framing an innocent schoolteacher for theft. That was just ... fortunate timing. The town hall buzzed with tension as noon approached. Every seat was filled, with townspeople standing along the walls, craning for a better view. Judge Harlan Monroe, a stern man with silver hair and penetrating eyes, sat at the front table, reviewing documents with a frown. Eliza sat beside Caleb, wearing her best dress, simple but dignified. She had returned his coat that morning, though part of her wished for its comforting weight around her shoulders. Remember, Caleb whispered. Answer truthfully but briefly. Don't let Rutherford or Hollister provoke you into saying more than necessary. The room fell silent as Judge Monroe cleared his throat. This hearing will come to order. Sheriff Hollister, present your case against Miss Bennett. Hollister stepped forward, hat in hand. Your Honor, Miss Bennett was found in possession of Mr. Rutherford's gold watch, a family heirloom valued at over $100. We discovered it hidden among her personal effects during a routine inquiry following Mr. Rutherford's report of theft. And what prompted this routine inquiry? The judge asked, emphasizing the phrase with skepticism. Hollister shifted uncomfortably. We had reason to believe Miss Bennett might be involved. What reason? Information from a confidential source, Your Honor. Judge Monroe's eyebrows rose. I see. Mr. Rutherford, please approach. Thomas Rutherford, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, stepped forward with confidence that bordered on arrogance. Mr. Rutherford, describe your relationship with Miss Bennett. Purely professional, Your Honor. As a town benefactor, I take interest in our educational system. Miss Bennett has been disappointing in her role. How so? The judge pressed. She has implemented unauthorized curriculum changes, teaching mining children alongside town children, introducing inappropriate literature. Inappropriate how? Rutherford hesitated. Materials questioning established social hierarchies. You mean teaching equality, the judge noted dryly. Continue. As Rutherford elaborated on his grievances, the door at the back of the hall opened quietly. A woman in a traveling cloak slipped in, her face partially obscured by a fashionable hat. She took a position near the wall, watching intently. When Rutherford finished, Caleb stood. Your Honor, may I question the witness? The judge nodded. Proceed, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Rutherford, did you ever offer Miss Bennet additional compensation for personal attention? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rutherford's face flushed. That is an outrageous accusation. Please answer the question, Judge Monroe instructed firmly. Absolutely not. I am a married man of standing in this community. Caleb nodded calmly. And where were you the afternoon before the watch was reported missing? At the bank, of course, where I always am. All afternoon, no visits elsewhere? Rutherford's eyes narrowed. I may have conducted some business around town, including at the schoolhouse. I don't recall. Caleb turned to the judge. Your Honor, I call Timothy Wells to testify. The young clerk approached nervously, avoiding Rutherford's glare. Mr. Wells, what did you witness the day before the watch was reported stolen? Timothy swallowed hard. I saw Mr. Rutherford enter the schoolhouse through the back door when it was empty. He went to Miss Bennet's desk and placed something in the drawer. That's a lie, Rutherford shouted, rising to his feet. This boy is disgruntled because I refused him a promotion. Order, the judge commanded. Mr. Wells, are you willing to swear to this under oath, understanding the penalty for perjury? Yes, Your Honor, Timothy replied, his voice steadier now. And I can also testify that Mr. Rutherford has been keeping fraudulent bank records to conceal misappropriation of railroad investment funds. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Sheriff Hollister moved toward Timothy, but Judge Monroe stopped him with a raised hand. One more witness, Your Honor, Caleb announced. Mrs. Eleanor Rutherford. The woman in the traveling cloak stepped forward, removing her hat to reveal Eleanor Rutherford's elegant features, now set in grim determination. Mrs. Rutherford, Caleb began, would you please tell the court what you shared with me this morning? Eleanor's voice was clear and unwavering. My husband returned home late the night before reporting his watch missing. He was agitated, muttering about teaching the Bennet woman a lesson. When I questioned him, he admitted planting the watch to discredit her because she had rejected his advances and threatened to expose his railroad scheme. Thomas Rutherford lunged toward his wife. You treacherous! Sheriff Hollister grabbed him, more to protect him from the angry crowd than to restrain him. Furthermore, Eleanor continued, I have brought the actual ledgers from my husband's desk, showing the discrepancies Mr. Wells mentioned. Judge Monroe accepted the books, examining them briefly before looking up with stern disapproval. Sheriff Hollister, I am dismissing all charges against Miss Bennet. Instead, you will place Mr. Rutherford under arrest for fraud, false accusation, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. As Hollister reluctantly led a protesting Rutherford away, the judge addressed the crowd. This court offers its sincere apologies to Miss Bennet for the indignity she has suffered. Her reputation should be considered unblemished. The townspeople surged forward, offering Eliza their apologies and support, Mrs. Parker embraced her tearfully. "We should have stood up for you sooner, dear. Can you ever forgive us?" Eliza, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal, could only nod. Through the crowd, she caught Caleb's eye. He tipped his hat slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The setting sun painted Redemption Creek in hues of gold and amber as Eliza stood on the schoolhouse porch. 3 days had passed since the hearing, bringing remarkable changes to the small town. Thomas Rutherford awaited transfer to federal custody. Sheriff Hollister had resigned in disgrace, and Timothy Wells had been appointed interim bank manager by a committee of investors. Most surprisingly, Eleanor Rutherford had donated a substantial sum to expand the school, insisting that Eliza use it to extend her literacy program to the entire community. "Quite a view." Caleb's voice came from behind her. He joined her at the railing, his saddlebags slung over one shoulder. "You're leaving," Eliza observed, feeling a pang of disappointment. "Got word of another case needing attention in Montana Territory." He gazed out at the town. "But I wanted to say goodbye. Properly. I never properly thanked you," she said softly. "You risked everything for a stranger." "Not entirely a stranger. I'd heard about the Virginia schoolteacher bringing education to mining children. Your reputation preceded you." Eliza smiled. "Still covering me with your coat that day. It was the first kindness I'd felt in a long time." "Some injustices can't be ignored," he replied simply, "even by a jaded ex-soldier." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the town settle into evening. Lamps were being lit in windows, casting warm glows against the gathering dusk. "Will you continue your Pinkerton work?" Eliza finally asked. "For now. There are still men like Rutherford out there, profiting from others' misery." He turned to face her. "But I've been thinking about settling somewhere eventually. Somewhere that values education and fairness." Their eyes met, and Eliza felt her heart quicken. Redemption Creek could use a man with your sense of justice. "The town council is appointing a new sheriff next month. Is that so?" A smile played at his lips. "And would the schoolteacher approve of such an appointment?" "She would," Eliza replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very much." Caleb reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, worn book. "I've carried this through the war and everything after. Poetry by Emerson. Thought you might appreciate it for your teaching." As she accepted the gift, their fingers brushed, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "I'll be back in 3 weeks," he promised. "Sooner if I can manage it." "I'll keep your coat safe until then," she said, nodding toward the schoolhouse where his duster hung on a peg near her desk. Caleb smiled fully now, the expression transforming his weathered face. "I'm counting on it, Miss Bennett." As he mounted his horse, he tipped his hat one final time. "Take care of yourself, Eliza." "And you, Caleb," she replied, using his given name for the first time. She watched him ride away, silhouetted against the sunset, until he disappeared beyond the ridge. Turning back to the schoolhouse, Eliza ran her fingers over Emerson's poems, opening to a page marked with a pressed wildflower. "What lies behind? U.S. and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us," she read aloud, smiling at the underlined passage. In 3 weeks she would return his coat, but something told her that by then they would have far more to exchange than just borrowed garments. In a town called Redemption, they had both found something they hadn't known they were seeking, a chance to begin again.